Are you looking for more insights on the big question, rent versus buy? Well, today we're privileged to have one of the foremost leaders in the world of real estate, Dave Meyer, the voice of BiggerPockets, which is one of the biggest and most respected real estate communities online for over 20 years, helping millions of regular people just like you discover the hidden in plain sight secrets of building wealth through property ownership. He brings his expertise to the show today, and he's going to enlighten us with some in-depth thoughts from a self-proclaimed data nerd. So you know I love this guy. Let's do it.
How to Buy a Home educates, protects, and connects first-time homebuyers to local, qualified realtors specifically for first-time buyers. Whether you're looking for DIY information or personal step-by-step guidance, How to Buy a Home is your #1 resource for first-time homebuyers.
I'm so excited right now because we've got a really exciting guest here today. Those of you who have been crunching around online and going deep in the rabbit holes, I'm sure you've seen BiggerPockets. We got the man. This is Dave Meyer from BiggerPockets, and he's here to talk to us all things real estate. Dave, an honor to have you on the show. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's such an exciting thing because I think that the first-time homebuyer journey goes from, oh my God, I'm adulting, to, oh my God, I've been paying rent for too long, to, well, I should start looking into this. And inevitably, when they start looking into it, so many of them see real estate investing. Thankfully, you're the biggest, most reputable, actually giving you real practical steps to help it, as opposed to so many of the other ones out there that are making big headlines because it's sexy. So for first-time homebuyers, what would you tell anyone first starting to research and study real estate? What are the things you should be looking at, and what are the most important aspects of understanding how the real estate market works just to get your feet in the water? That's
a great question. There are so many elements when you're first getting started to try and understand. But if it were for me, I would do the simplest thing. I tell people this all the time who are maybe a little hesitant or just unsure about getting into real estate, whether it's as an investment or as a first-time home buyer, is just to go Google the median home price in the United States over time and just look at the trends there. Because a lot of people, I'm a millennial, and I think a lot of people in my generation really remember what happened in 2008. And they have a lot of hesitancy or fear around the real estate market, and that's totally understandable. But when you zoom out in real estate, the picture becomes quite clear that it's a very stable asset class that, if you are in it for the long term, offers really predictable, great returns, whether, again, as an investor or as a primary home buyer. So I think just getting that truth into your mind is like a really good place to start before you start figuring out exactly what tactics and approach you want to personally take to getting into the market.
Well, I kind of figured you were going to give me the best answers of anybody I've ever talked to, but you're right. I'm not saying you're right. I'm saying, oh my God, yes, heck yeah. Zoom out, historical perspective. I mean,
totally.
Looking at the bigger perspective, just right now, 2025, there is a gigantic fear that's happening. And I love to zoom out and show people, this is 2008. This is 2011 and 12 when I was telling everybody, boy, it'd be a great time to buy a condo by a college right now because they're going to go up. And no investors jumped in because they were scared. So with that in mind, there's so much fear happening in 2025. I get so many people that reach out as looking for first-time homebuyer, any kind of guidance. So many people are feeling priced out, especially in what they call the HCOL, which is a new term on Reddit for high cost of living, which I love.
I'm familiar, yes.
Cool.
I love Reddit, so I hang out there.
Yeah, buddy. It's a great place, but oh my gosh, I go to the first-time homebuyer subreddit and I just sit there and want to cry.
Oh gosh.
The advice that people are giving each other. So I would love for you to give, a lot of people say, I can't afford a place here in Chicago. I'm just going to buy $100,000 investment someplace else, in another part of the country first before I buy my first home. How do you feel about people doing that in this high rate economy or high rent economy that we're living in?
I think it can make sense depending on what your personal goals are. And this is sort of a blanket statement about real estate. One of the amazing parts about this asset class is it's really customizable. You can turn it into whatever you want. And if you want to build a portfolio, I think that there is a fair argument to make that buying a rental property, probably in the Midwest, that offers some modest cash flow and could appreciate over 10 to 15 years is great if like that's what you're trying to do. I also think that buying a primary residence is a solid financial decision. It's, it depends. Like it's probably not going to be the best return on investment of your entire life, but it provides, in my opinion, a very strong, stable sort of base for your financial life that you can hold on to for as long as you want to. And so different people have different goals. Some people want sort of a high flying, want to build that portfolio. There's the whole FIRE movement I'm sure you're familiar with. If you want to retire early, buying rentals might make more sense. If you have a family and you want to sort of just like build like a strong base and foundation financially, buying a primary home is probably the better choice. And then there's a third option, which we can get into, which at BiggerPockets, we coined the term house hacking, which is sort of like a hybrid of buying your first home and renting property, which is a great strategy in those high cost of living places as well. I'm happy to talk about that approach too, if you want to.
Absolutely. House hacking is a gigantic topic here at How to Buy a Home. One of our very first interviews with a listener who got connected with what we call the unicorn realtors. They actually qualified on their own, didn't even need to get a cosigner, but still decided as a young couple, they were young, didn't have a family yet, and they just had their buddy move in.
Nice.
And
perfect.
So expand on house hacking. This would be great information for our folks.
House hacking is a owner-occupied investing strategy, which is exactly what it says. It's basically a property that is both your primary residence and an investment property. And there's essentially two different avenues that you can take to house hack. The first is to buy a multi-unit property, and typically that would be still a residential property, which is defined as 4 units or fewer. So you buy a duplex, you buy a triplex, you buy a quadplex, you live in one unit and you rent out the others. That's one avenue. Personally, one of the ways I got started as a real estate investor. And then there's also a more, I guess it's like, it tends to skew for the younger audience, but people buy a single family home and live in one bedroom and find roommates. And that's a totally good approach too. So both of those are ways to become an investor and lower your cost of living. And the reason it's so beneficial is, I guess there are a couple of reasons. The first is that you get access to residential financing. Normally, if you're just buying a rental property that you don't live in, you typically have to put 25% down. Your interest rate's going to be a little bit higher. If you buy a primary residence, you can qualify for an FHA loan, which usually has a 0.5 point lower interest rate. You can put sometimes as low as 3.5% down. There are 2013 loans. If you're a veteran, you can do this, and use a VA loan. There's just much more flexibility on the loan side, which is just super beneficial. The second thing is that as an investor, like when I go out these days, at this point in my career, when I go and buy a rental property, it has to cash flow. I need it to generate a certain amount of cash every month to make it worth the risk and my time. But as a house hack, all you needed to do is to reduce your cost of living to make it an effective financial decision. So even if you are still paying $500 a month, let's say, for your mortgage, that's probably less than what your rent was, especially if you're in a high cost of living area. Plus, in addition to that savings, you get the tax benefits of homeownership, which are very significant. And you also get the potential for appreciation. You could do renovations and increase the value of your home. And so you're sort of getting all of this, all the benefits of an investment and a primary residence in one. And then the last thing I'll say is I understand your audience here, David, is mostly people who are getting their first home. But if you buy your first home and you get the bug and you like it, it's a great training ground for real estate investing. You learn a lot. And if you want to go on to buy 2 or 3 rentals over the course of your life, you'll be very confident in your ability to do that. So there are more, but I think those 3 are just super compelling reasons why people, especially in high cost of living areas, should consider house hacking.
I've been listening to your show and several others. I went back to one to last summer. The gentleman's name was Colby, and you interviewed him, and he was a teacher.
Yeah, Colby Gord, I think his last name is.
Boise,
Yeah.
Idaho, 17 grand a
exactly.
year. His wife was freaking out when he decided, in like phase 2, when he decided he was actually going to do it. And it turned out being great because she was the practical one and he was the one that had a little bit more of a risk taking. That was a small part of the interview, but let's just say it resonated.
Good.
But
yeah, I think that it struck a chord with some people.
What I really enjoyed about that was it wasn't necessarily a long-term goal. He originally got the idea from Carlton Sheets, which I laughed because you're younger than me, so you don't remember it, but I got the Carlton Sheets.
I have interviewed enough people to know who Carlton Sheets is
cool.
because a lot of people cite him when they talk about why they get into real estate.
Dude, it was pre-internet, pre-anything, and if you couldn't sleep, Carlton Sheets was in your face.
Yep.
So he didn't have the intention of going out, and a lot of the times, like this whole house hacking, if you get into the formula of it, the actual algorithm of what you're doing, a big thing that I'm telling my folks, because it's so difficult to purchase a home in the current affordability, is that a lot of times looking at it as a rent replacement strategy and understanding the full math of it. If you're renting for the average of $2,100 a month in the areas where homes are average $427,000, if you're only quote unquote cash flowing because let's say your new mortgage is $800 more than your rent and your roommate's only going to pay you $700, you're only at $100 or you're at $100 loss and you're not flowing yet. But $2,100 a month is now going into that asset. And like Colby did, I think he said, you interviewed him last summer, he still has that piece and he started before the crash.
Oh yeah, I bet he does. He should. And it's probably close to paid off now. And at that point, 20, 30 years from now, especially if you choose to make a couple of additional payments, then you're, getting a couple $1,000s a month in revenue just by owning one rental. I think that's a whole other topic, but people really, I think, overestimate how many rentals you need to make a significant impact on your life. You hear these people on social media being like, you need 1,000 rentals, and it's all nonsense. The most successful investors I know own a dozen, 24 rentals, and they just pay them off and they do great. And again, it's not for everyone, but for people who buy their first home and enjoy home ownership and like the idea of real estate, this, your first home is a great way to get into real estate. And I've been harping on this for months now that, I'm sure, David, you see this stuff, but people like Grant Cardone and Robert Kiyosaki go out there and say that your primary residence is not an investment. And it's just, it boils my blood. It's just such nonsense. I mean, they're smart people. They have other good opinions, but that one it's just crazy. House hacking is a great investment. Buying a primary residence can be a great investment if you do it smart. I'm doing a live-in flip right now, which is a whole other way to use your primary residence as an investment. So there's just so many ways that it's a good financial decision. Is like going and buying something that you can't afford a good decision? Of course not. But like, let's make the assumption that most people are going to buy are going to be rational and buy a wise home. Like that, to me, is a no-brainer if you're looking to buy a first home.
There's a whole bunch of regular people out there that need to use their homes or can use their homes like you're talking about. And
totally,
what we do is we focus much more on the planning aspect that the real estate industry has completely dropped the ball. Just like you're talking about Grant and all these other people talking about, you need to have this giant portfolio. Wonder why? Because you buy more courses from them. Anyway, I won't get into that.
Yeah, exactly.
So expand on that statement, because someone like that, if he's scrolling online, he's seeing someone telling him he's got to do 12. Expand on one property or one and another can still be a great way to live a very comfortable life.
Yeah, it's really all about time. And I think that's the real benefit of real estate is if you're trying to get rich quick, you probably need 20 rentals in 5 years if you want to retire. But if you're just trying to build a comfortable life over 10, 15, 20 years, then buying one rental every 3 or 4 years can be remarkably effective. Particularly if you take the cash flow that you start to generate over time and just reinvest it into your portfolio and don't use it for your lifestyle, for that first 10, 15 years. That's basically what I've done. And what countless other investors I know have done as well. And there's a few reasons for this. One is, going back to my first piece of advice, is just like looking at the median home price. Just like any market, there are cycles and there are times when home prices go flat. But if you zoom out and you own properties for 10, 15, 20 years, there's literally never been a time in the United States where you wouldn't make money on that. The second thing is, the amazing part of residential real estate in the United States is that the debt is fixed. And Dave Ramsey has his opinions about debt. I disagree with them. But the great thing about residential debt is that you get to lock in this price. Your mortgage payment, if you want to keep it for 30 years, can stay the same. But rents go up 4 or 5% every single year. And that might not sound like a lot. And in the first year, even if you're earning $1,000 and then you're earning a little more and a little more and a little more, 15 years from now, instead of earning $1,000 a year, you're going to be earning $20,000 a year. And that's not an exaggeration. Like, I have properties that I bought that I was living in that didn't cash flow. Fast forward to today, I bought this property I'm thinking of 11 years ago. It makes $30,000 a year after all expenses, all repairs, everything. Like, it just waited. I didn't do anything. I didn't do any major renovations. And the value has gone up, which is great, but I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about the cash flow that this one property will generate for me. If I did that 5 times, that's $150,000 a year, right? And like, everyone will be able to buy at different cadences, but that is true without me even paying off those mortgages. If I wanted to pay off the mortgages, I could probably be earning, it would take me some time because I have to save up some money. But if I wanted to do that, I could maybe be making $300,000 a year off 5 or 6 properties. So it really is just a matter of waiting and what you want to do and your priorities. But for me, real estate's a patience game. So you wait, if you do this methodically over 10, 15, 20 years, like, you're going to get wealthy. It's pretty reliable.
So on the show, I always talk to people, it's not trying to time the market, it's your time in the market, stealing that
Totally.
from whoever said it first.
Yeah, we all steal that.
Of course. What do you say to your people? Because it's the same philosophy. Everything that you just spoke about, the basis is, but you have to start. So
yes.
We don't want people to jump into something blind. We don't want people to gamble. How do you communicate to people when the difference between taking action and doing your research and over-researching before you take action? Because that starting point, you only get it once, and that's what makes you the most money.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, this is not surprising. I'm a data person. So my answer to people is always to just do the math. And it's not that hard. Like, there are calculators you can go Google right now. BiggerPockets, we have some, but like, literally, if you just Google like buy versus rent calculator, you'll see that it's a function of time. And I just did this for myself, actually, because I've moved quite a few times in the last couple of years. And I've actually been renting since 2020 because I lived abroad and I didn't know how long I was going to stay. And then I just moved back to the United States, and I'm actually doing this live-in flip, but I was debating whether I should rent or buy. So I've done this math quite a few times recently. And for me, it's usually come out to about 5 years as a break even. It's basically, if you plan to stay in your home for 5 years or longer, it's usually beneficial to buy a home. For every year after that, it just becomes gravy, right? If you're going to stay for 9 years, 10 years, for sure. So that's how I recommend people look at this. It's that it's not, you bought at the exact right time. It's like, I just lived in this house for 5 years. And the reason for that, you've probably talked about this on the show many times, but real estate, one of the, considerations, it's not all rainbows and butterflies. There are downsides. One of the downsides is that there's significant transaction costs in real estate. And so even though your property value most likely will be flat or go up in any given year, when you go to sell, it can cost anywhere between 6 to 10% of the purchase price to sell the property. And so you need to wait like 5 years for the property to appreciate, to pay down your mortgage a little bit, to overcome those transaction costs. And that's the main reason you need to like stay in your house. And again, that's just a function of time. So if you start the clock now, regardless of market cycles, it's probably going to be about 4 or 5 years. If you buy and the market goes down, that stinks. No one wants that. It happens. I bought my first deal in 2010 and everyone's like, oh my God, that was so lucky. It's like, yeah, but my property value went down for 2 years until the market bottomed. And then, people tend to forget that, to forget that part. But yeah, if that happens to you, it stinks. But like, then your break even's probably 6 years, or 7 years. And so it's still a relatively cost efficient thing to do, unless you plan to move every couple of years. So I think that's how I would recommend people look into it. The other option, though, I should mention, because I am a real estate investor, is the way to get around that is if you live in a property for 3 years and you want to move, hold on to it as a rental and then buy another one if you have the capital to do that. But a lot of times you can refinance, take some money out, or get a new FHA loan. There's a lot of ways to do that. And so that's another way that people, if you're not ready to sell, you haven't held on to it long enough, or you just like the idea of owning rental properties, you could just do it again.
There's a reason the real estate industry isn't selling this, because they know a first-time home buyer is going to leave in 6 or 7 years. And when they do, it's a sell and a buy. That's 2 deals for the broker. If you teach them to keep that first home, it's only one. There's 1,000 little secrets I've uncovered.
I never thought about that. That's so true.
Oh, yeah. And I'm not even going to get into the fact that 71% of real estate agents didn't sell a home last year, yet they still continued to build the model of bring in anybody and play the numbers game instead of actually training the agents to do the job. And who gets and who do they send them to? The first-time home buyers. See why I started my podcast?
Yes, I do. Thank you for doing the work.
With that and understanding that you have a fixed property and seeing all the different directions that you can go when your rent isn't increasing. Because last year, the average age went to 38 for first-time
crazy.
home buyers.
It's insane.
And I'm just thinking about, gosh, how much money they would have saved with 10 years of renting.
Yeah.
And now all the math that you're talking about, I think, is such a gigantic thing that people need to see. If someone is a first-time home buyer and they're doing the research, what part of the research of just buying their first home do you think translates into them potentially thinking about being an investor?
So you're basically asking, like, what should they do up front when they're buying their first property that might help them sort of see the big picture about investing in real estate long term?
Or I'm asking them what parts of buying a home of the process do they not even realize they're understanding how they could potentially buy in the future as an investor?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Investing, like, it's really not that hard. That's the great thing. It's just, honestly, the challenge is mental more than it is logistics or tactics or anything like that. So much of the fear I think people have is around the transaction process, which is like, how do I get a lender? How do I, find a title company? How do I find an agent? Those types of things. And that's not any different from being an investor to being buying your primary residence. The thing that you need to learn as an investor, that's sort of like a secondary thing, is the rent side. Like how much, being able to underwrite rent and expenses accurately is a big part of the game for investors. Just when you're analyzing a deal, someone might tell you can rent it for $1,200. Someone might tell you $1,500. That's a pretty big difference when it comes to your return. And then some people are very rosy and optimistic about what their expenses are going to be. I tend to skew on the other side. I'm extremely pessimistic about everything breaking. I'm an optimistic person, but as an investor, I just I prefer to just choose everything goes wrong. And I think as a homeowner, you start to learn those things, right? I think everyone as a homeowner, you start to see the things that break and how often they do. And this is just part of being a homeowner. How much time it takes to maintain the lawn or, change out the air filters every month. Like those are the types of things that you have to scale as an investor that you can learn by being a first-time home buyer and see if you like it. For me, a lot of people are always like, I don't want to be an investor, like all the work, maintenance, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't mind it. I've never minded it. I did maintenance on all of my own properties for 10 years. And I'm not a very handy person. But so I like it. And I think a lot of people do take satisfaction and pride in home ownership. And I think that's something you can sort of apply to your investing, which is cool. So I think those are the two things. And then the only other piece is sort of tenant relationships. And that's a thing you don't get exposure to as a first-time home buyer, but honestly is not that hard. At BiggerPockets, we have a ton of free resources that you can use to learn how to do this. And really, it's just if you're good at maintaining any types of relationships, if you've been in a customer service type position before, or any career or job where you interact with people, it's not that bad. And I find that people assume that the tenant landlord relationship needs to be or is sort of inherently adversarial. And that's just not the experience I've ever had. I have good relationships with pretty much every single tenant I've ever had. And so I just think it's people sort of work that part up in their mind that it's going to be worse than it actually is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That makes perfect sense. So, random, what were you doing in Europe? What took you out of the country, man?
Yeah, so I always sort of wanted to. I studied for a year in college abroad, and I really enjoyed it. And my wife also wanted to do that. And then randomly in 2019, her company, she was working for a startup. She was an early employee at a tech company in Denver, and they got bought by Booking.com, which is a Dutch company. Did not know that until they bought my wife's company. And they transferred her to Amsterdam. And luckily BiggerPockets said that was okay. And we lived there for 5 years in Europe. It was incredible. One of the coolest, best experiences of my life. Don't regret it for a minute. But just moved back just for a lot of reasons. But we had a fun experience. And yeah, I mean, whole other topic, but definitely highly recommend it for people who have the opportunity to do it.
That's incredible. And oh my gosh, what crazy timing. It was 2019. The world explodes. Now suddenly you have this new information because people were so concerned about remotely doing potentially investing because it's out of state and whatever. And here you are going, oh, I did it across an ocean.
Yeah, that's true. I moved to Amsterdam. It was like December 30th, 2019. So,
Whoa.
6 weeks later, COVID hit Europe, because if you all recall, it hit Europe before the
Italy
United
first.
States.
Yep.
Yeah. And so we started having lockdowns, I think around the same time, but 6 weeks later, we were already talking about COVID. And so, yeah, it was an eye-opening experience for me. Because one, I was already in the process of having to learn to be a homeowner and a landlord remotely. And then it was doing that sort of on steroids because the whole world was shut down. It was harder to get people to do anything, and people were fearful. And, there was all these rules about rent increases and moratoriums. And, for one of the first times in recent memory, real estate was really on people's minds. And so it was a good time for me, right place, right time kind of thing, where I was learning something and able to teach something that became really in demand.
Okay. So then before we turned on the microphones, I asked Dave if I could do these gotcha questions.
Please.
I've always wanted to ask every real estate guru. If you're such a real estate guru and you're working for a company that sells coaching and professional programs to help people do it, why aren't you just investing and not selling this to other people?
Well, a couple things. I don't consider myself a real estate guru. I am a real estate investor and a real estate educator, but I don't sell any personal coaching or courses or anything. I work for BiggerPockets. BiggerPockets does have paid memberships, but we take great pride in the fact that our memberships are about $350 a year, as opposed to a lot of quote unquote gurus who sell courses that are $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000 a year for the very same information. And BiggerPockets always has made our education mostly free. You buy books, but we charge for tools and that sort of stuff and in-person events. So those cost a lot of money. And so we charge for that kind of stuff and stand by their value. So totally. The other thing is I never wanted to be a full-time real estate investor. That was never my goal. I got into real estate as sort of a side hustle because I wanted to be in tech and I needed cash. And I was, graduated college in 2009, and it was hard to find a good job and it was easy to find real estate deals. So I did a real estate deal with 3 partners, and was managing the property myself to make an extra $200 a month. And I turned out to like it. And so I actually went back to grad school even after I became a real estate investor for data analytics and data science. And so I just have professional interest personally beyond real estate. And so working at BiggerPockets for me is sort of the perfect hybrid where I get to work in tech and I get to work in real estate, and I love it. But I do invest in real estate. I do deals all the time. So it's not like I'm just teaching this stuff. I live it every day. But I also have a cool job where I get to talk about it.
I preface that as a gotcha question, but everything you said about BiggerPockets, I 1,000% agree. If someone were to come to me and ask me the question that I asked you, I would defend BiggerPockets and say, yeah, go look at everyone else who's charging X, Y, and Z, and look at the free information and look at the longevity that you guys have had in the marketplace. I mean, BiggerPockets was been around before you started investing and before, I think they started right when I started real estate.
2004, it's 21 years.
My gosh. Yep. Yeah, they started, I started a couple years later. And so that's a wonderful thing. And it's so interesting. You talk about being, you're a practical person, you're a tech person, degrees in that. Yet here you come around to this educator. I think that speaks to the fact that the tech and the analytics and the data are a really important part of this thing that a lot of people, just equate with, put in the grind and do the hustle. And you're much more about the practicality of it.
Yep. Yes. I have always been, and there are a lot of other great real estate educators out there. Don't get me wrong. A lot of them focus more on motivation or lifestyle. And don't get me wrong, mindset and motivation, all that stuff is super important. It's just not me. I am a self-motivated person. So I've never really needed the wake up early and go to the gym kind of thing. I don't know. I'm lucky in that regard. And to me, it's just a math problem. It's I'm such a nerd, but it makes sense to me. And people always say, on YouTube or whatever, they're like, of course you're promoting real estate. You work for BiggerPockets. That's true. But I also wouldn't work for BiggerPockets and I wouldn't invest in real estate if I thought there was a better asset class. If I was, I'd just invest in stocks if I thought it was better. I don't love real estate so much that I would deliberately lose money off it. It doesn't make, that argument just doesn't make sense. So I will keep investing in real estate for as long as I think it's a good asset. And I do think it's a good asset. So I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, there's Carlton Sheets way where you knock on the door and try to assume somebody's mortgage, and then there's the new way that we have to do now. So with BiggerPockets, you have the platform where you can get a lot of information for free. You also have the platform where you can do a really high return on investment and be a part of the professional program. And then I did talk to you earlier, and I just wanted to clarify this. You do have agents on your website that are featured for people who are looking for local real estate agents. And those agents are another profit stream in some way for BiggerPockets, in that it's the agents who make the commitment to pay to have the relationship with you guys. And then you guys will let them know, here's people who want to work, who are using the education we've given them and they want to now get after it. And you connect those people.
Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic.
Yes. And we really focus on investor-friendly agents. So what BiggerPockets is all about is finding, working with agents who invest themselves or who have, spent time educating themselves about the fundamentals of buying investments. Because as we've talked about, it's sort of different for everyone. Some people don't care if their first time home, their primary residence is a good investment. Some people fall in the middle. A lot of people fall in the middle. They want it to be their primary residence and a good investment. And then some people are just give me the best ROI, and our BiggerPockets is more on the ROI side of things. So we find agents who sort of understand that mentality and help people find deals based on that mentality.
Which helps. I mean, that's a lot of part of the reason why I started this whole How to Buy a Home platform, was because not only are there is the bar too low to give yourself a license in places. So you have people that unfortunately just aren't trained well enough because the business doesn't do that for them. But then you also have people that are specialized. And there are some people that might be heavy with investors, which is interesting because it can actually translate to first-time homebuyers. If your first-time homebuyer is someone who's like, I'm good to do the work.
Absolutely.
That's such an easy correlation there. But understanding the niche of the person that you work with can be very important. And terrible segue here, but I just wanted to say, I think one of the biggest pieces of this that BiggerPockets can really open, the very first thing you said was go look at median home price to get the perspective. You've brought such a perspective to house hacking. Yeah. I think that can be there's so much fear right now. And I think house hacking can be the simplest, because people look at the rent versus buy and think, well, that doesn't make sense. It's $800 more than my rent. There's so much more math than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's not that easy, but go on. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I wish it was, but, so with the house hacking, as the people are moving forward and they're getting in, they have the fear that's holding them back. And we've discussed that time is best for them to start. What are the things that you think people should be looking at with the house hacking? You mentioned all the things, but is there a math side of it that will help them get over the fear?
Yeah, I think the math side is just looking at your current expenditures and then figuring out at the end of the day, if you own a property, how much you would generate or how negative your property would be. But it's not as simple as David said, that's just comparing those two things. So I think a couple things you should be looking at are, one, rent growth over time, because, it might be an okay deal today, but it will get better. That's the cool part about real estate, is that, like I said, your debt and your biggest expense stay fixed. Your rents go up, so your revenue increases, so your profit increases typically every year. It's great. The second thing is the tax advantages of real estate ownership is something I think that a lot of people miss. I certainly missed it for the first few years of being a real estate investor. I didn't even really think about it because I had no money. And so it wasn't like a big deal. But if you buy a house hack, your interest on your mortgage is tax deductible. And so that can be thousands of dollars a year that you may not see in that calculation of comparing your rent to your mortgage payment. But at the end of the day, think about it at the end of the year, how much take home, how much spending power you're going to have in one scenario or another. So I think those are two things. The other things I would consider when you're doing this analysis, one is appreciation. And I personally, people in the real estate investing community really debate how much you should count on appreciation. For me, I put about 2% a year. That's lower than the pace of inflation. That's lower than the long historical average because I'm conservative. But they go up. Prices go up, right? That's just how they work. So, saying there's going to be no appreciation is a little ridiculous. And so, in my opinion. So that's one thing. And then the last thing, if you really want to get sort of advanced about it, is something that we call value add, which is basically how, being able to improve the property. So if you're handy, this is a great thing to do. And even if you're not, finding and looking for properties that have this ability to increase value, whether that's through some easy strategies like, paint and sort of a cosmetic renovation, learning the math behind that can be really encouraging because it's a great way to make money in real estate. Or you can go all the way up to a more complex renovation, which is adding a unit, a very popular thing right now with ADUs or accessory dwelling units. They're kind of like mother-in-law suites. Some people call them carriage houses, that kind of thing. If you learn the math behind those things, you'll start to see that even, your basic vanilla kind of house hack is good. But if you really want to get into it, you can turn it great with a lot of these other strategies and approaches that you don't have to do instantly. You could wait 5 years and do them. But thinking about, sort of the different ways that you can maximize and optimize your asset, I think is a really encouraging thing. I have this framework that I use on my podcast called the Upside, where it's buy a deal that's good today and identify when you're buying the deal, 3 or 4 different bets that could turn it from a good deal to an excellent deal. That could be adding units and renovating. That could be buying in a really popular area. That could be, doing an owner-occupied strategy. There's all these different bets you can make to take real estate from a solid deal to an amazing deal. And that's definitely true with owner-occupied strategies.
I think it can be such a perfect funnel. So for those of you listening who are, this is intriguing to you, this is the way it's going to work. You start with us, you come in, and we're huge proponents of the ADU. You get an ADU, and then we funnel you over to BiggerPockets, and then you become an investor and you use that first home as
Totally.
that stability,
Yep.
It's crazy. So many people tell me the one thing they want in their life is, or in their living situation, these early, late 20s, early 30s, people call them, it's control. That's the word I hear all the time. And they're not talking about they wish they could paint their walls, but they can't because they're a renter. They're talking about their rent. They can't control the hike next year, or the apartment or the home being sold out from underneath them.
Totally.
So,
I mean, it's honestly, it's something I think about myself. Like I just moved to a very high cost of living area. It's on paper cheaper to rent here than to buy, but I am in my late 30s and I just don't want to move that much anymore. And so I'm going to make the decision to buy a single family home. And that doesn't mean it's a bad financial decision. Is it the perfectly optimized decision? No, but like being an investment property, you should buy for the best ROI, I believe.
Yep.
Primary residence, it's a mix, like we talked about that spectrum. It's a mixture of like, where do you fall on the spectrum of like ROI versus personal life? And it's your life. You spend so much of your time at home. I work from home. It's like I spend most of my day here. And so I just want a place that I own. And because of that, we didn't really get that much into it, David, but like, because I am a nerd and I needed to like find a way to make money off of my primary residence, I'm doing what's called a live-in flip, which is an amazing strategy for first-time home buyers. If you want to renovate your home, it can get into it, but the tax benefits are huge. So it's like it's a cool thing that you can do as well.
Yeah, I have in Southern California worked with a lot of contractors who every time I would call them every couple of years, they'd be in a new place because they did 2 years for the capital gains tax and then they'd move. And
exactly.
It's a fantastic strategy.
It really is. It does work really well. It's my first time doing it though, so I'll let you know how it goes.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah.
Well, as you could discover, here we are gabbing away. Get two real estate nerds in front of microphones and we could go forever. So I fun. Really, really appreciate it's so exciting. So glad that you guys found us, and I'm so glad to introduce our folks into this multiple facets of taking control over your life. So thank you, Dave, for being here. It was great having you on the show. Thanks, buddy.
Absolutely. Thank you, David, for having me. I appreciate it.
Looking for more DIY education or your own personal step-by-step guidance through the home buying journey? Since 2019, How to Buy a Home has been the #1 resource for first-time home buyers. So visit howtobuyaHome.com to get started.